Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mental Health Awareness Initiative, and today we have Dr. Abhimanyu Chandak from Mysore. So, please introduce yourself. I would like you to tell our listeners as to what you do as in the form of a profession.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Dr. Abhimanyu, and I practice as a neuropsychiatrist in the city of Mysore. I've been here for almost 4 years now, and basically I work with this. It's a foundation called Viveka Foundation, which has its own psychiatric hospital setup and also a clinic within the city. And what we do is the normal psychiatric care as it is, along with the addiction and rehabilitation. Along with that, what we also do is we visit the nearby hospitals where there might not be a professional psychiatric setup on a reference basis as and when required. And we also provide home care in the form of either physiotherapy or occupational therapy, or as a psychiatrist visit for, especially for the geriatric patients, but also for any other psychiatric emergencies too.
You talked about addiction part. So have you seen a rise in that area because of this COVID?
Actually, when the lockdown hit, there was a serious drop because obviously alcohol was not available, but the serious addicts still managed to get their substances from wherever it was possible. But post-lockdown, I wouldn't say there is a rise, but it has come back with a vengeance, sort of. So there is definitely a lot more stress that people felt that they had to relieve. So they went to drinking or smoking as a coping mechanism. There was a lot of, interpersonal issues and work-related stress that came up. So people used alcohol or whatever other substances to relieve it. But from a personal experience, I would not say that there was a rise, but yes, when it came back, it did come back with a vengeance.
Okay. So you found in your own practice that people were actually, if not even into addiction part, but there was some, stress?
Yes. Yes.
So how do you take mental health aspect in your city, let's say? How are people facing
Right. So mental health is relatively quite open. As a state itself, Karnataka is quite open to mental health, is what I have seen. Especially the city and the surrounding the surrounding communities and areas that are present around Mysore. So Mysore does not just give us patients from just the city itself. We get a lot of patients from the surrounding towns and villages as well. So I do see a lot more patients, especially with respect to addiction-wise, they're quite open. Quite a lot of patients come, or their caregivers come saying that we need this person to get de-addicted. But also from other perspectives, it is a place that I've seen where people catch on quite quick and are really open to coming to psychiatrists. But as usual, as elsewhere, there is always the 4 other doctors that they go through before they come to a psychiatrist. But the referral system here is quite good. The other doctors know when to prescribe patients for psychiatric help or psychological help whenever required. So that's a good thing in our city.
So people can approach without any hesitation?
Of course, there is a hesitation. I mean, stigma does exist in India, and that's a very big part and parcel of our I wouldn't say culture, but it's a part and parcel of how we have looked at mental health for so many years.
True.
So stigma does create a bit of an issue. I still get patients who are more comfortable with home visits than coming to the clinic because they're scared that, I enter this thing and it's on the main road. How are they going to, people are going to talk about this? And unfortunately, I find this more among the higher end of the society and the people living within the city as compared to the ones coming from local towns and villages. What I've seen is that the people coming from these sort of, I would say, lower to middle socioeconomic strata are more worried about that this is affecting our income and I need to get over it than what other people will talk about. Even if other people talk about it, I don't care. My income is getting affected, and that's how the word of mouth spreads too. That they go back and they tell that, like, I was facing this problem and the doctor made it all right. So then we have more people coming in. But in the higher socioeconomic strata, I see more of, oh, if I go there, then they will call me mad, and all of that stigma is much more.
Very true. So how do you see mental health as in your own personal life?
I wouldn't say I've struggled with my mental health in my own personal life, but I have seen a lot of struggles. It was something that came very naturally to me to help people out. There was, for some reason, and I realized this very late, even MBBS, pre-MBBS, there were times when people would come up to me and share their thoughts, and I would be quite a patient listener. And I think that's where me as a professional
doctor,
that's where I shine, that even I listen quite patiently. So looking at that, I saw that there were so many places that so many people, like, in their everyday lives, just normal things, which for others, for some people might be, very normal reactions, for others would turn out to be really huge problems. And I realized that mental health is not something that is abnormal, or that is, that is something that will cause a lot of problems to everyone. It's just a normal, exaggerated normal reaction. That's how I always, describe any mental health. I wouldn't even say a disorder, a disturbance. It's just a normal reaction which is exaggerated. So in my own personal life, of course, I've had my struggles at points of time. MBBS is a huge struggle, 5.5 years, away from the family, struggling to get through. And then we have exams to write. We have another entrance exam, then go through that and then get to psychiatry. But I think I faced my major challenge when it came to the lockdown, because we were supposed to have our exams somewhere in March, April, and that's when the lockdown hit. So I think those couple of months was where I really had a chance to apply on myself what I had learned in the 3 years. So yeah, I think that's
introspection.
Yes.
Introspection happened. Okay, that is wonderful. And what you have also, very nicely said that mental health is nothing abnormal. It's only an exaggeration, and it's only a disturbance which is caused due to this exaggeration. Yeah. That's really wonderful. And what would you give, like, if you had to give some quick tips, like, what would you suggest? But before that, how do you know that any person may need help? And if so, how to extend help?
Okay. So, so there are certain things that can be very obviously made out if you are aware of them, right? So there's this saying that goes, your eyes don't see what your mind doesn't know. So you really need to know about these things to be able to recognize them in yourself as well as in others, right? And some of these things are actually quite simple. For example, you can look at, let's take a broad category of behaviors, right?
Okay.
So when we say behaviors, it can be anything. It can be sleep, it can be eating, it can be exercising, it can be speaking or interacting with others, going outside, whatever it is. So if you look at behaviors and you see that someone was behaving in a certain way before, and there's a drastic change in it, or there's a sudden change in it, or you see that there are even small changes, if you can recognize them. Obviously, the drastic and very fast changes are easier to recognize.
Very true.
Yeah, but even sometimes you can recognize the small ones if you know the person quite well. So if you see that there are these changes in a person which was not there before, right? And these changes are not healthy, right? So they're clearly not healthy. Someone not eating well, not sleeping well is clearly not healthy, or eating too much, sleeping too much, again, not healthy, right? You see that it is harming them rather than helping them. These behaviors are more harmful rather than helpful. You feel that, you know, their way of behaving or their way of thinking. Sorry, I keep getting interrupted by calls. So yeah, you find that their thought process, the way they are thinking or the way they are behaving is unreasonable or it's unreal, right? These are some things. Then you can not really understand or make sense of these thoughts or behaviors when you compare it to what they were earlier. So someone was doing something else earlier and is now doing something very different, right? And finally, it is out of proportion to the events, right? So say something very small happens and someone gets very angry, starts to break objects or hit people, hit themselves. It does not seem to be in proportion with what is happening, what should have been the reaction or what was their reaction before they started to get disturbed. So these are some simple things that where you can recognize that this person might need help, right?
Correct.
I would like to end on a very simple point that most people who do not feel mentally well want help, just don't know how to ask for it.
True.
Hence the onus.
So what should others do?
Right.
But
so,
what?
Yes. Please go ahead.
No, you were saying something.
No, you asked me what can others do, right? So
yeah, others can do, yeah.
Right. So the first thing is that you need to realize that mental health is as important as our physical health, and it's as normal as our physical health. You know, these are two interlinked things together and you can't really separate them. So if you see someone having a fever, would you or would you not initiate some sort of treatment either by yourself or take them to a doctor? Then why is it so different when you see someone struggling with their mental health? It's the same thing. So you can simply start off. So there are 5 main things that can be done. One is you need to ask the question. And I say the question and not a question because these are very specific questions, right? It's not a good idea to point out that you're doing like this. Why are you doing like this? Or how are you feeling this way? Why are you feeling this way? Those are not the questions. The questions are very simply, are you okay? Is everything okay? Is there anything you want to talk about? These are very simple, open-ended questions, right? Which can start a conversation. It may not be it may not take the direction you would have wanted it to take, but it starts a conversation. It lets the person know that you care for them and that you really want to listen, right? So that's the first step. The second step is, even if the conversation doesn't go in the direction that you wanted it to, even if the conversation doesn't go in the direction that you wanted it to go, you can make sure that the person understands that you are there for them. And this needs to be said explicitly. You need to tell them that if there's ever anything you want to talk about, or you need any help with something, I am there for you. And mean it and do it when the time comes. Right? That's the important part. Saying it is very easy, but meaning it and being like, yes, okay, there is something that I would really like to help this person, right? The next part comes where, say this person does reveal certain things to you. Then you need to be ready to make the tough choices. There might be a place where the person might not be ready to take help yet, but they have, confided in you. And you feel that this is out of your scope of handling. Then be ready to, maybe you might need to approach a mental health professional from your own end and ask, what can I do? What can be done? And take their advice as to how to get this person to a mental health professional. You might, in case there is a severe mental disorder, you might have to call an ambulance. You might have to use the help of law enforcement. These are very tough decisions to be taken, but sometimes they're necessary. Not always, but sometimes they are necessary. You would call an ambulance if someone was having, say, a heart attack. So why would you not call an ambulance on someone who has suicidal impulses? It's the same thing. Both of them can result in death. So why would you not? The fourth thing is that you need to listen. And this is very important. When I say listen, I don't mean hear or, just give advice. Just listen. There's a concept called as empathetic listening. So you need to listen while ensuring that the person, again, understands that you are listening to them and not trying to give advice, not trying to judge them in any manner. So listen, say statements like, I understand, yes. Statements like, I understand, it's okay, yes, we can get you help, and things like that. Rather than just, our natural tendency is to either give advice or, say we jump to a conclusion and then we say, oh, why don't you do this? Why don't you try this? That's not what the person needs in these moments. The last thing is, I've already mentioned this, but I'm going to mention this again because it's very important. It's something I really believe in, that learn about mental health, understand, gain knowledge, understand mental health from a perspective that you can recognize it, as well as know what to do next. So ask the question, make sure that the person knows you're there for them, be ready to make the tough decisions, listen empathetically, and learn about mental health so that you can recognize and take the steps when needed. So these are some of the simple things that can be done by any normal person. And I spoke very in a very open manner, not specifically, spoke on it very broadly.
It's very insightful and it's very simple to actually relate to, and wonderful tips. I hope people will keep that in mind when they are interacting, especially amongst their peer groups or family members. If one tip you have to give for coping the stress factor only, what would it be?
Specifically to COVID or in general?
Right now, because of the situation right now, let's just focus right now in during these new situation,
Right. So one thing that happened with COVID was a lot of people started working from home. There was more time spent at home, and their regular schedules got disrupted. So I think one coping mechanism that I would really like to put across, which worked for me very well during the lockdown, was having a schedule, irrespective of what my day looked like, whether I was supposed to go down or go out, not go out, whatever it was. I ensured that I maintained a schedule. And specifically with schedule, what I try to, I practice this, and I usually tell this, is that your schedule is not a timetable to be followed to the T. It's not a school timetable. That just because this is written, you have to do this. But there are some non-negotiables and there are some negotiables. And I put across simple 5 non-negotiables, for the first of which is waking up on time, having your breakfast, lunch, dinner on time, and the last one is exercise. And I don't think there should be ever a compromise on these 5 things. And I think if someone can create a schedule where they wake up every day on time, they have their food on time, and they exercise every day, irrespective of the time of the day, whenever they find time, for even half an hour, I think rest of the things just fall into place, because now there are slots that you've created. There's a slot between waking up and breakfast. There's a slot between breakfast and lunch. There's a slot between lunch and dinner, right? And so you have the slots that you just have to fill in with either, say, work or relaxation, as simple as that.
Very, very true, because we do need, a schedule to follow. because
Yeah.
time will be very different as we move on, but the schedule will, take us in the moment only, make us stay present in the moment actually.
Yes.
So
yes, no, absolutely.
very true. And what type of cases that you have seen recently bounced back quickly regarding mental health? Like, okay, you advised something, or they followed what you had given the advice, and so they coped up nicely.
Sorry, you got cut off. I'm really sorry. Can you please repeat?
Okay, what were the things, if at all, you had told recently to your patients that helped them to tackle the situation?
Specific to the kind of patient, I don't feel like it's I can give a solution that openly. It's very person oriented, and also the kind of problems they're facing. But something that came up quite is sort of quite openly out during this COVID time was the anxiety, right? And with anxiety, it was because people didn't know what was going to happen next, and then it was because people started getting infected and affected, and people started passing away, and then there was the whole this thing of the job losing their jobs, and now it is more of, okay, COVID is over, things are opening up, but I'm still not working as much as before, I'm still not earning as much as before, and things like that. So financial stresses are one of the main causes for this. And the thing that really helped with this anxiety was focusing on the present, not really looking at things as a whole, but breaking it down, and looking at it as small parts rather than looking at it as a huge rock. So it was like the rock is made of small stones, so let us pick out small stones rather than tackle the whole rock at once. So that was something that really helped a lot of my patients.
That is wonderful, and I hope everyone can absorb the rock solution that you have given, and everyone may rock during this COVID. This too shall pass. Definitely.
Sure, definitely.
And it was really lovely to listen to you about the 5 things that you have shared with us.
Thank you.
It's excellent. Thank you for taking out time, Mr. Abhimanyu, and hope to connect again in future. Sure, you also take care. Thanks a lot. Be safe.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Take care.
You too. Thank you.